This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Hey Richard, what do you think the scariest thing is?
Being deprived of oxygen.
No, it's actually silver balls. That's the scariest thing you will ever see, is floating silver balls.
Silver
Don't,
balls.
you're scaring me!
It's spook time in the city.
It is spook time in the city, and we're continuing on with our annual Spooktober celebration here on the Cult Popture podcast, here on film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast, where every fortnight Richard and myself, AJ, cover a film franchise. And since it is Spooktober, we're of course doing a couple of spooky ones, which we can actually do at any other time of the year. It's more the restriction we put on October, because restrictions breed creativity. Is that the term?
Yep.
Innovation? What do people say?
Paradigm.
And today on the podcast, as voted on, very passionate voting process for this episode, we are covering the Phantasm franchise. This is why I mentioned silver balls, because if you don't know anything about Phantasm...
If you're not scared of silver balls, you clearly haven't seen Phantasm.
Silver balls are maybe the defining imagery from the series, so you may have actually seen more of the series than you think you have if you haven't already.
If you've ever seen a silver ball.
If you've ever seen a silver ball, that's the
a
gist
Phantasm
of it.
reference.
If you've never seen the Phantasm franchise, this is probably still a pretty easy episode to listen to. So stick around if you have or if you haven't. But the Phantasm franchise is a series of 5 schlocky horror films released from the late 70s to the mid-2010s, which focus on a malevolent undertaker known as the Tall Man, a supernatural entity, or phantasm, if you will, who steals dead bodies and reanimates them as little demon things, with the intent of overthrowing the earth and existence as we know it. The Tall Man famously used these floating silver balls as his main weapon, which rocket around the place with protruding blades, and they stab their victims in the head, and then the drill goes into their brain and all their blood comes out. Yeah. The Phantasm series, or at least the first film, has garnered a cult following over the years for its low-budget charm and gory practical effects. What's really interesting about the series, as opposed to the others we've covered, which begin with a low-budget entry and then secured a fan following and a higher budget, things like Mad Max or Evil Dead or El Mariachi. The budget and certainly the production values for the rest of the Phantasm movie, they don't really improve. They stay about the same, very consistent. And instead, the entire series maintains a very lo-fi aesthetic, with some of them even looking worse than the first film.
Yeah.
After researching this series, one thing has become abundantly clear, and that's how dedicated its fan base is, with the series of very comprehensive Wikipedia pages and other resources that feel like they were written by either diehard fans of the series or the cast and crew themselves. All of this goodwill towards the franchise, Richard, is why it breaks my heart to report up top that this may be one of the least enjoyable franchises I've ever seen. There it is, everybody. If you're a big Phantasm fan, I said stick around. Maybe you don't want to now. Or maybe you want to hear a difference in opinion from someone who's seen these movies once and barely remembers them and wouldn't remember them if I didn't write them down.
It's a very, it is one of those very blend togethery kind of franchises as well, I find. But that's
consistent!
also
it's a good thing!
But that is also due to the kind of dream-likey kind of surrealist aesthetic they're going for. So a lot of it does blend into one, because almost by design that you're not supposed to know where reality starts and ends,
Very
blurring
cool.
the lines as it is already, and then that ends up blurring it. It's not a franchise made to be binged.
That's a good way to put it, and maybe that's the problem.
This is supposed to be a franchise you grew up with and have lived to see one of them be released at least.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. So the films we'll be talking about today include Phantasm in 1979, very early for our podcast. Phantasm 2 in 1988, Phantasm 3 Lord of the Dead in 1994, Phantasm 4 Oblivion in 1998, or Phantasm Oblivion or Phantasm Oblivion, because the IV make up the middle of Oblivion. And then Phantasm Ravager or Ravager in 2016. So 18 years after the last one. The first four were all directed by Don Coscarelli.
I would say Coscarelli.
And they all star one Reggie Bannister, who we'll be talking about at length over this episode.
And also, they all star Angus Scrimm as well as the tall man.
That's true, as the tall man, yeah. Who we won't be talking about. Phantasm 1979, directed by Don Coscarelli. Do you know what this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I would guess like 76.
It is 74. So pretty low for a cult.
Well, yeah, like no, it feels like that kind of like even the good ones not that good. Like which is why I went for around that. It feels like it could go either way. Like I'm glad it's not rotten.
Right.
But I'm also glad it's not fresh.
And to sort of drive home what the Wikipedia pages read like when they're clearly being written by people who love the series a whole lot more than I do. And I haven't actually asked you really how much you liked or disliked these yet, but maybe you can tell us.
Maybe it'll come up naturally.
Yeah. I've sent you synopses for each of the 5 films that were written on the Phantasm franchise Wikipedia page, and I'm wanting you to read these synopses because the language used in them is very dumb IMDb trivia.
Right, okay, and I haven't read these yet. I'm reading these. Blind and cold.
Very good.
Help, I can't see and I need a jacket. All right.
It really is Spooktober.
So this is for Phantasm 1979. The residents of a small town have begun dying under strange circumstances, leading young Mike to investigate. After discovering that the town's mortician, only known as the Tall Man, is killing and reanimating the dead as misshapen zombies, Mike seeks help from his older brother Jody and their friend Reggie, a local ice cream man. Working together, they try to lure out and destroy the Tall Man, all while avoiding his minions and a deadly silver sphere.
So not too wacky in the way.
Yeah, I presume these get wackier because that was a pretty apt description of the film.
It is an apt description, but it does read more like the blurb on the back of the DVD case as opposed to a Wikipedia synopsis, right? Like, I always shudder when I see like subjective adjectives and these sorts of things. What did you think of Phantasm?
I actually quite liked Phantasm, I'm going to say. I understand. It's like, in a lot of ways, it's like a perfect cult film.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
It's like this is the kind of movie, and I've spoken before a few times about the 24-hour movie marathon I've gone to the last 3 years, and this is like a perfect movie for that. Or like the sequels more like they tend to be a little bit shittier than this. But it's that kind of like, and you're watching it at 3 a.m., you're half asleep, you kind of, again, it's that blending of your real life with the movie. And it's like, it's a cool, like a mortician who's reanimating bodies is a dope like logline for a film.
How clear do you reckon that is in the film?
Not at all. No, not at all.
I don't really understand the lore of Phantasm. I don't get what's going on for a lot of these movies.
But just the aesthetic, the low budget kind of nature, that sort of the grassroots filmmaking, and also the fucking score is phenomenal. It's better than the movie. The score to this film is like something like, I think I saw somewhere like Wikipedia maybe like mentions that it's like considered one of the greatest horror film scores of all time.
Right.
And I totally get that. Like watching it, I was like, this is used in something else. And I think
I'll play it under you talking about it. I don't remember it.
Oh, it's so good. And it's like there is like a main theme to it, kind of thing. It's a little bit similar to Halloween, which came out a year earlier. Mm-hmm. And I played it for Jess and was like, this is dope, right? Like, and is this from something else? And that was like, I was trying to figure out. She said it, and it does actually sound very similar to the Goosebumps theme song. But I've never watched Goosebumps, so that's not where I recognize it from. But I think it is one of those things that this is just...
Is that the
Goosebumps? I think it's just one of those things where this is so influential that I must have seen hundreds of things that were inspired by it, and realizing this is the creation of it, and this is at its best form here. Great score.
We need to talk about the scores more in these franchises.
When you get Carlisle on, he knows everything about music.
Every single thing. He's heard every sound.
Three episodes in a row that we've shouted out Carlisle.
Well, maybe he'll get a shout out later on as well. Really? Obviously, the charm of this film.
I forgot why.
Comes from some pretty fun backyard filmmaking. And while I didn't hate this film by any means, I'm worried what it says. I am worried about what it says about me, that I'm just so unenthused by this kind of thing now. Maybe it is a symptom of watching so many franchises. But whenever I see whenever I see this kind of thing, like, you know, fun gore and heads coming off in fun practical ways, I don't know, man. I guess I've just seen it too much. I guess I've just seen bad taste too many times. You're like, and I know how fucking miserable this sounds, and this has got to be the most negative Nelly take to have ever been on a film podcast. That practical effects are boring, like, because that's what so many people get into filmmaking for. And
give me some bloody CGI. That's why Phantasm Ravager is the best one.
Yeah. And look, I get that it's not maybe the most, it's maybe somewhat too hot of a take to be like, practical effects suck, but I'm talking specifically about these low budget ones, and it's not that I dislike them, it's just like, I've seen it. If this is all the movie has to offer, I have seen this shit and other stuff.
Oh, fair enough. Whereas I'm like, I'm on the same kind of mind that I've seen this before, but I'm still charmed by it, I guess, is the thing.
Fair enough.
I will just say that
I'm not saying I'm better, you know what I mean? Like, I'm envious of you.
Like you're saying.
Weird that you'd bring it up if you don't feel it.
One thing that blew me away when I initially started doing research for this episode before we swapped is that, so this was written, directed, shot, and edited by Don Coscarelli, who was 25 at the time. Which is like, this is his Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
He peaked so much at the start of his career. He did make Bubba Hotep, which I know you're a fan of.
I love Bubba Hotep. Yeah, Bubba Hotep's great.
And I haven't seen it. But he also made John Dies at the End, another film I haven't seen. But I bought the book years and like when it came out.
Very funny title.
Never read it and then didn't watch the movie. But yeah, like it's. I think that adds to the charm of the film, that this is just some fucking kid, you know.
Yeah, right.
And doing everything himself. It's been a banner year for people doing everything. I mean, just this and Robert Rodriguez, I guess.
Well, he didn't actually do everything himself, but it does add to the narrative of him being a kid, because his dad financed the film for about $300,000. So that's our first budget, right? That's our first budget is that's $300,000. And his mum made a lot of the special effects and costumes. My mum's not that fucking cool. Have your mum making you like all this blood and guts and stuff. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I will be updating you on the budgets as the series goes on, because I'm usually not a budget guy, but the films stay so consistently poor looking that I was like, what's the deal here? What's going
What's
on?
the deal?
J.J. Abrams. Are you familiar with this person, Richard?
He made Super 8, I believe.
He also made a little film called Star Wars: The Force Awakens, in which
My
a
favorite
character,
Star Wars.
in which a character is named Captain Phasma, and was named after this film because of her silver suit. This is Abrams' quote is
And she
quoted
looks
as
like
saying,
a ball.
Phasma I named because of the amazing chrome design that came from Michael Kaplan's wardrobe team. It reminded me of the ball in Phantasm, and I just thought Phasma sounds really cool. So there you go.
Do you know what was funny? And sorry to bring this up, but when we saw The Last Jedi together at a midnight screening, and you were adamantly defending it, which you do to this day, and I was not
I do
into
to this
it.
day.
But one of my complaints was that Captain Phasma just shows up and then is immediately defeated, and not even in like should have had more to do. I was expecting more from the sequel. It was just like, that was a dumb thing to just introduce her that late into the film. And you were like, no, she was in the film the whole way up until that point. And it's like, one of your defenses is just completely factually inaccurate. She's in that one scene and that's it.
My new defense is that she is the Tiny Toon version of Boba Fett, who also dies in a similarly unceremonious way.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the tall man, Richard. Because
he's quite tall.
Well, I disagree. That's my note. He's not that tall. For a guy named for his height, he's not that tall. He's actually, the guy who played Jody was very similar height to the tall man in real life, and they had to use a bit of creative photography to make him look taller. But I just don't think it's the defining characteristic of the character. And if it is, if it was supposed to be, they could have made him a bit taller, I reckon.
He's Angus Scrimm, the actor who played him, is approximately 6'4", and he wore suits that were too small for him and platform shoes to accentuate the height.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 6'4" isn't, it's like tall, but if it's like, this is a supernatural entity called the tall man, I kind of expect him to break 7 foot, you know?
Yeah, but also, like, he's named by a little kid, right?
Probably, yeah.
Like, because it's Mike, and I believe the first time that someone refers to him. But I went back and forth as the franchise went on about how I felt about the tall man as a moniker. Like, part of it is like, it's so cool just having like just the tall man. Like I don't know. It's just, there's a mystique about it. But then sometimes I'm like, well, it's kind of a stupid name. But then it's like, well, what else would you call, like the Mortician or something like that?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'd call the whole franchise the Mortician.
Morticia Adams.
Well, I don't know. Just like Phantasm it feels like the title you give it because you can't think it. You don't want to call it the Tall Man.
Well, yeah, Phantasm's a bit like Friday the 13th. That it's like, it doesn't need to be called this.
Yeah. Do you like Angus Scrimm's performance?
Again, I think I went back and forth on it a little bit. Like, he's, I don't know that his performance is insanely consistent, but then I think that's more to do with how much the tall man has to do in each film rather than his actual acting or direction.
Yeah. Do you find the film scary?
No. I mean, like, I could understand. I would say the word I would use more than scary would be like unsettling. And not even that I was necessarily unsettled by it, but I think it's going for more discomfort than horror,
right. Yeah. I wanted to talk about the ending of this film with you because I'm not sure I fully picked up what it was putting down. It basically ends and implies, so Jody, the older brother, dies, and a car wreck while escaping the phantasm. And then Reggie, who's looking after Mike, Jodie's little brother, kind of seems to act like none of this actually happened, like it was all a dream, and that Jodie died in some other event, and that the events of the movie didn't actually happen. And then Mike, in an ending reminiscent of A Nightmare on Elm Street, though that wouldn't come out till much later. He's pulled into the mirror from the tall man, the reflection.
Also kind of similar to, is it Friday the 13th Part 2?
Mm-hmm.
Where he reaches through with Baghead Jason.
Right, yeah, true. And it's confusing because the rest of the series kind of seems to operate on that not being the actual ending. But I don't know, I just wanted to know what you thought. Did you think it was confusing?
I thought the whole series was confusing.
Well, initially while watching this, I found myself thinking that this series was unlike anything we'd ever covered. Like,
I thought it was exactly like everything else we've ever covered.
I don't know, it just had such a unique vibe, and that's for better or worse. I'm not
it's
happy that it... Yeah, right. But then I remembered one franchise it is quite a lot like.
Critters.
Which is Critters. And I became determined to not let this become another Critters episode, because people won't have realised this unless they've heard us talk about it. But when we recorded the Critters episode maybe 3 years ago, we were just like, oh, this is a eventless franchise. Like, it's another one of these franchises which feels like it has this intense fan base, but I've never heard anyone from the fan base say anything. It's just
is weird.
Evidence of a fan base and like actors you've never heard of.
It's like, surely there's a fan base, but like Critters is the platonic ideal of like a forgettable franchise. It's like it's the poster child for forgettability.
Do you have any more comments on this? Won't be a Critters episode, by the way. It's going to get silly.
Ooh.
Do you have any more comments on the original Phantasm that you want to bring up?
Just check out the score.
Just check out the score.
I wonder if it's available on vinyl. Oh, that would be pretentious of me. Phantasm soundtrack vinyl.
Do you reckon fans of Phantasm call themselves Phantasm?
I did see some articles where people are like, personally, I'm a fan, so blah blah blah, and it was spelled PHAN.
Very good. Very good. Phantasm 2 came out in 1988, also directed by Don Casarelli. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
This would be 46.
It's got 40. Why did you guess 46? What's your thinking behind
that? I don't know. I guess I'm going with numbers that end in 6 this episode after my 76 guess. And I just thought 40 was the right, decade that would have fallen. I would guess that Phantasm is the only fresh one. And then this one I would say is one of the higher ones, but not quite 56. So 46.
Well, it's 40. Do you want to read us what the Wikipedia synopsis has for Phantasm 2?
I sure do. In Phantasm 2, picking up exactly where the previous film leaves off, the tall man and his minions attempt to take Mike, but Reggie manages to save him by blowing up the house. 8 years later, Mike, now a mental patient, still has nightmares about the evil mortician and is the only person to recall that dreadful night. Upon being released from the institution, Mike, who's had a premonition about Reggie's family, tries to warn his friend of the ensuing danger before an explosion murders the entire family. Convinced by Mike's futile warning, the two men set out to track the mysterious mortician down and rescue Liz Reynolds, a young woman who has a psychic connection to both Mike and the tall man.
Does she? I think why I wanted you to read these out is because they're not written.
I've got such a nice voice.
Yeah, that's true. No, they're not written like functional synopses. They're written like someone trying to secure funding for the movie.
Right.
Like they're logline-esque, What did you think of Phantasm 2?
Panic. Phantasm 2 is like, it's this weird thing where you can see the cogs turning behind this screen.
You got like a steampunk TV.
It's like because they recast Mike, and they're clearly trying to go for a bigger movie star with James LeGros.
It was nearly Brad Pitt.
Yeah, I actually knew that. Because then, yeah, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I'm just too phantasmed out. But and then also like this is the clear like, all right, yeah, let's make this a franchise. They make it a lot more linear, which I know was a note from the studio, and yeah, it's very much and it does the when introduced to Reggie's 4-barreled shotgun, which is like his staple kind of thing. Yeah, it just, this feels very much like, remember these elements because they're going to pop up again because we're going to make more sequels, you know?
I don't think I really hated this one at all. I think it was, I maybe liked it a little less than the first one. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I see the downfall as much as other people see it. Maybe it's because I wasn't that jazzed on the first one. But Cosarelli initially didn't think the first film needed a sequel, but, quote, had what he described as a breakthrough when he realized he could start the film immediately after the previous film's final scene. Which is a very interesting thing to have a breakthrough. I could just keep going with the story. I guess it's maybe not the most obvious place to start a sequel, but it's not rocket science, Don. It's not silver ball science. So yeah, this movie happened because Universal snapped up the Phantasm IP because they wanted to be sort of their new trademark horror, and they dropped it pretty quick after the critical reception to this one. Universal also funded the film for $3 million, which is a very low budget for Universal. Apparently, like one of the lowest budgets of the year for a film, but the highest budget for any of the Phantasm films. So One Man's Trash, etc., etc. I've got a dumb Wikipedia entry here. I saw this written on the Wikipedia page, and I thought it was written very stupid, similar to what I've been saying, that like there's this earnestness to how everything is written about this franchise online that I want to make fun of because I am a bully. So the following is written under the themes section on the film's Wikipedia page, and it reads like someone insisting the movie is bad on purpose. Like, you know, that like, why did they intentionally make it bad? Well, here's an idea. This is what it says. John Kenneth Muir states that, like many horror movies of the 1980s, Phantasm 2 shifted its focus to guns. Sequels in the 1980s were required to be bigger, gorier, and have more firepower than previous installments. The theme of bigger is better means that everything is upgraded. A quadruple shotgun, golden spheres, there's golden spheres, by the way, and increased weaponry, a chainsaw duel, and the nature of the tall man's death. Muir states that the narrative of a boy dealing with the loss of his family is unchanged, but it's approached differently. Instead of the surrealism of Phantasm, it is approached in a conventional, less abstract manner. And it's like, it's not, it's a sequel.
Yeah, it's so funny, like, acting like the theme is bigger is better.
And like the reason it's like just flat out not as satisfying or authentic as the first one is because they were going for something, and not because the on record studio interference happened. It's like recorded. As you mentioned before, one weird thing about this film is that Mike, who's the little boy in the first one, he's recast. He was played by A. Michael Baldwin. That's his first initial A, not just any Michael Baldwin, but A. Michael Baldwin. Played him in the first film, and was ultimately recast with, as you said, James LeGros in this, though Baldwin would return to the role in the rest of the sequels, which is very strange. And did you notice that it was a different actor?
That's a really interesting question.
Well, like, and it's not I didn't pay attention thing.
I don't know if I noticed. I think maybe I didn't notice it was the same character. Weirdly, like
Oh wow. Okay. I was gonna say it's not an issue of you not paying attention. It's like you maybe didn't because the actor's grown, the character's grown. But if you didn't know they were the same character, that is an issue of not paying attention.
I don't know. Yeah, like I know. Yeah, I think I had read already that they'd recast him.
Because I knew he was recast. Well, I saw him and was like, that's not the same. That's not the little kid grown up. He looks so different. And then when he appears in the sequels, he looks so clearly like the little kid from the first one grown up. I was like, God, maybe it was him in the last movie. And it wasn't until I was researching for this today that I found out the recasting actually happened. So this happened because the recasting happened because Universal, who financed the film, wanted Coscarelli to recast all the roles with more well-known Hollywood names, and he was able to compromise on one of the two returning cast members. So he recast Mike, but he kept Reggie Bannister as Reggie, who, ladies and gentlemen, I think is the worst protagonist I've maybe ever seen in anything. I thought this guy ruined these movies. I thought he fucking sucked, dude. In terms of the podcast, I think the only character we've seen who matches Reggie's lack of charisma would be the dude from Tokyo Drift. with the funny accent, the southern drawl.
Was it Sean Black or something?
Yeah. That's the level of like lack of charisma that Reggie has. And initially, I had like a little crisis about this, Richard, because it felt like one of the only things I had to talk about with this franchise. But then I was like, are my reasons superficial? Am I being a bully again?
Because he's bald.
Is it because he's bald? Is it because he's not very Hollywood attractive? Like, he doesn't look like an actor. He looks like some guy. Am I being, like, part of the problem by, like, being like, this guy can't be the main character? He's gross and looks like a real person.
He's gross.
So what... was it because he's a bald man with a ponytail, which is maybe the worst hairstyle there is? Is that why I didn't like it? Because I was like, is this a man who's refusing to write off his hair and is still like, no, I can still make it cool?
Do you know, actually, like, watching Ravager, I had the real, like, if my hair was looking like that, what would I do? Because like, okay, obviously the ponytail's not, and, you know, obviously that's ridiculous, but the, like, you know, the when you're completely bald on top, like, total chrome dome, but you've still got real decent coverage around the sides and back. Yeah. It's like, it actually kind of looks better than being fully bald. In a weird way, and I was having the thought of like, would I go completely bald? Because I've always thought it's like sad that, you know, that men hold on to that, but it's like if you have such decent coverage and are just completely shiny bald on top, like, is that better? And I couldn't work it out. My friends, I could not work it out because I've been growing out my hair recently, and I've been thinking about hair a lot lately. And I don't know what I'm doing with my hair.
Well, I know,
by extension, my life.
I know for a fact that we have a lot of bald listeners, so I'm not trying to come out as anti-bald here. To me, it's the refusal to accept that your hair is gone because the ponytail.
Yeah, the ponytail's like
the ponytail. He looks like comic book guy.
Yeah. And it, like, I mean, I guess like if you're wearing a hat, people might not know, and they'll be like, well, damn, he's got long hair for an older gentleman. But yeah, do you know what? I kind of like Reggie as a protagonist.
No! My God, I hated him. He ruins these movies.
I don't know. Maybe it's a more of an on paper thing as well. But the fact that it's just some fucking dude, like
this ice cream salesman.
It's such like an unassuming, like. Yeah, you know, it's one of those things, being told that this like horror slash kind of action in places franchise has an ice cream vendor who's just played by some guy who
As the
is in
final
every
girl.
film is like an actor only because he's in these movies.
God, and he shows up in the first one in such an unassuming moment. Like, you've already met the two brothers, and then Reggie shows up at one point. And had I known that man would change my life at the time, I would have reacted differently to seeing him. I also think he's a pretty bad actor, I think, as well. And there's also a sex scene in this movie where a woman rides him like a rodeo bull, including yee-haws. And is this why I didn't like him? Yes.
'Cause you're
but
jealous.
Also, there's more to come as we continue forth with our discussion on Phantasm as we go into Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead from 1994. This was directed by Don Casarelli. Cosarelli. And what do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
What did I say last time? 46? 36.
This is 44, so slightly higher than Phantasm 2. And can you please read what the Phantasm franchise Wikipedia page details as the plot of this film?
In Lord of the Dead, once more picking up exactly where the previous film leaves off, the tall man has infiltrated the minds of Mike and Reggie, the two friends, Mike and Reggie, the two friends. The two friends embark on a journey to find him and kill him, only to discover that he has destroyed town after town, leaving zombies in place of the living. Along the way, Mike and Reggie meet several characters who share their goal, including a murderous boy named Tim and two young women who are excellent fighters.
There's so much wrong in this synopsis. First of all, Mike is like out of commission by the start of the film. He gets put in some kind of coma or he gets kidnapped or something. And so, to my horror, Reggie is the lone protagonist of this one. Describing Tim as a murderous boy is really funny to me. Like, of all the ways, like, I get he's violent and he's a boy, but like a murderous boy. And the two young women who are excellent fighters is really one young woman, because the first young woman gets murdered by one of the terrifying silver balls in her first scene.
Yeah, she couldn't fight it off. Sorry, it's not a great fighter.
Not that great of a fighter at all. This had a budget of $2,500,000. So a little less than the second film, but still quite high for the series. What did you think of this one?
This one feels like because on the Wikipedia page for Phantasm the franchise, it's like in the characters it says Mike Pearson. It says is the main protagonist of the series, and Reggie is the third person named, and I'm like. What the? Reggie's the main character, but it really switches in this film because in 4 and 5 he's also completely inarguably the main character, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I don't know. I mean, it is like it's a worse movie, and you know, a long gone are the haunting notes of the first film's score and the surreal, dreamlike aesthetic, charming, low budget, and it's kind of just like it's bordering parody at this point. We're introduced to the. Or I don't know, I'm not really introduced to it, but it reaches its zenith here. The running gag of Reggie's ineptitude with women. With Rocky, one of the two young women who are excellent fighters. And it does that thing because she like the spheres, you know, which are these otherworldly, undefeatable things. She like whacks one with a nunchuck, and it's like you're like nerfing the series' greatest weapon. Just to show off how much of an excellent fighter this woman is. But like a nunchuck as well, like of all the weapons to be like this one can finally go toe to toe with the silver balls.
Yeah.
It's
their one weakness.
Nunchucks.
So I found this film pretty painful to watch, mainly because Reggie is upgraded from sidekick to lead, and he's the single worst protagonist.
And so much of the film is just him trying to get laid.
Yeah, and it's, as I said, it's not just because I'm bald phobic. It's also because he's canonically a sex pest in this movie. And Richard, I encourage you to put on some safety goggles because we're about to enter problematic corner.
Ooh. this didn't age well. Let's get a life at someone else's expense. I have to warn you, this might get obscene. This the problematic corner where ain't nothing PC.
And there's the theme song that was made for us by Carlisle.
Carlisle, forever synonymous with problematic corner.
So content warning, I guess, for like coercion is what I would call this. Joining Reggie in this film, as we said, is this murderous boy named Tim, as well as a young black woman named Rocky, who is also a lot younger than Reggie. And nevertheless, he intentionally books a motel room with only one bed, makes the little boy sleep in the car, and then tries to get it on with a very uninterested Rocky. He touches her, he pushes up on her, textbook unwanted advances. She ends up handcuffing him to the bed after he thinks that she's going to get kinky with him, and then she just goes to sleep, leaving him there. Now, much like Tarantino's sex offender character in From Dusk Till Dawn, I don't think having a sex pest as a character is inherently problematic in and of itself. I think it's a little odd to have them as the protagonist, but maybe you're doing something with your film, right? Where the problematic thing comes in, I think, is because later on in the film, Reggie has a sex dream about Rocky where the actress gets naked and moans about how big his dick is, and the fact that they actually film this is like, did Reggie Bannister write this? Like, did he? Because he probably did. Like, it's not that much of a reach. He probably wrote this scene or insisted upon this scene.
Yeah, because like Reggie was cast in the first one just because he was mates with Coscarelli, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like it's a classic Salma Hayek's foot in Tarantino's mouth situation where I got you, bro. You know. And also the fact that the character's name is Reggie and be like, oh, you will film a scene where she's naked and she goes, Reggie, your dick is so big.
And it's just so like, by that point in the movie, like Rocky is kind of this cool independent character. And then with this, it's like, nah, but don't worry, lads, watching this movie.
She's still a sex object.
We got her. And that's why I think it's problematic and I thought was pretty disappointing. But Reggie Bannister isn't just creepy. He's also,
he's also bald.
But he's bald and has a ponytail. He's a real bad actor. And there's a scene at the beginning of the film where Reggie and Mike are visited by like the ghost of Jody, the older brother from the first film, who can transform into an orb now, or is an orb. I don't know. And Mike is shocked out of his mind. He's like, "Oh my god, Jody! I thought, what? How are you alive?" Reggie does this. I'm going to try to replicate the exact performance that Reggie Bannister gives when he walks in and sees his best friend who died over 10 years ago. He goes, "Jody, what are you doing here? I thought you were dead."
I thought you were dead. I couldn't believe
it. What are you doing here? I thought you were dead.
How would you react if you thought I died 10 years ago?
I wouldn't be able to speak. I'd be
I wouldn't react.
lost for words. I'm not the only person that hates Reggie. Well, I'm sorry, I am the only person that hates Reggie. Or at least there does seem to be some love for him. I went on his Wikipedia page, which there is a Wikipedia page for the character.
Nice, love that.
And I found this statement on like reception to the character. Twitch Film says Reggie Bannister remains one of the most unlikely action heroes ever committed to celluloid, but the man sells it like crazy. Fairnet chose the character as one of their favorite sidekicks. Nate Yap of ClassicHorror.com calls him the most badass dude to ever drive an ice cream truck. And William J. Wright of Film Threat calls him one of horror's most interesting and truly human heroes. And in a positive review of Phantasm 2, Amy Alexander of the Philadelphia Daily News stated that Bannister brings both authority and a sidelong look of helplessness. I have a theory that most of these people probably look like Reggie Bannister. That's why they're being so positive towards the character.
I feel really sorry, especially for Amy Alexander, if she looks like Reggie.
She probably could have a ponytail.
Finally, representation for ponytailed people. I think the Film Threat one of horror's most interesting and truly human heroes. I think there is something to be said for that. That it's a solid unlikely hero, and just the fact that he's just some dude, and he's just played by some dude. Like,
He's just played by some dude. And that's why I feel so bad talking shit on him, because the dude isn't even that famous. His Wikipedia page, along with every other Wikipedia source on this episode, is 100% written by him, and reads more as like a CV than like a record of his achievements or whatever. Reggie Bannister is maybe the most borderline close to just being a regular guy than any celebrity I've dunked on this podcast. And this whole goddamn franchise just feels like a friend of mine made it. Like, not a specific friend, just some guy I know, and they're asking me for feedback, and I'm like, I don't really want to give you feedback. Oh my god.
Well, that's how it feels being this film winning the Patreon vote. It's like,
being mean to everyone who voted for it.
People are so attached to this franchise, and like last episode we were like, Phantasm's coming up, okay, and I'm still like that. It didn't win me like. I get the first one. I understand why you would think the first one is a classic and one of the all-time great horror movies, but come on.
Phantasm 4 Oblivion in 1998, directed by Don Coscarelli. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
26.
It's got 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. What put you in that ballpark?
I've been going down.
It's a good strategy for almost every franchise. And can you read us what the Wikipedia page for the Phantasm franchise says that this movie is about?
Taking off immediately where the last one ended.
It's
In
how
this
they all
episode,
start. It's how all the synopses start.
Mike travels across dimensions and time, fleeing from the tall man. At the same time, he tries to find the origins of his enemy and what happened the night that his brother died. Meanwhile, Reggie, accompanied by a beauty he picked up on the road, battles the spheres and the undead in a quest to find Mike before the tall man can complete his transformation.
Why does it say he's accompanied by a beauty? That's so weird. Why does this Wikipedia page should be an objective source? No, but it's supposed to be an objective source of information, and it refers to a woman as a beauty. This film's budget was $650,000, so a little more than double the original film, but significantly less from the 2 and 3.
Would that even be like with inflation? Would that be like or more or less the same?
Probably.
Let's have a look. So what year did this one come out, sorry?
1998.
So 1979, 1998, 300,000. Calculate. Yeah, 673,000. So it's actually almost the exact same budget relatively with inflation.
Wow. What did you think?
I'm glad I looked that up. That's the first time I've ever looked up inflation for this podcast, and it happened to exactly prove my point. How often does that happen?
Well, you're going to get to prove it even better later on. What did you think of this movie? I keep giving you these tantalizing. And you're like, what are you talking about?
So this one we get a lot of backstory for the tall man. You find out that he lived a life.
Jebediah Morningside?
Yeah, Morningside for life.
Is that a Brotown reference?
It was a Brotown reference. And for those of you who don't live in New Zealand...
Fuck you. You don't get to
know. This one was, more than anything, was slow, I think.
Yeah, that's
and a franchise when a franchise you're not that interested in slows down this much.
I thought this movie was honestly just more of the same. I've never had a harder time remembering what scenes were in like a 3-movie stretch.
Yeah,
in this franchise.
There's a weird consistency to this franchise.
That's exactly what I've written right here. I've said it's a franchise more... I've never seen a franchise more tonally consistent and yet so mind-numbingly dull as Phantasm.
Like, if you're fully on board with this franchise, like some people are, I can see why you would think all of these films are great, you know?
Like episodes of a TV show that took 40 years to come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that this one gets points over the last one, in my opinion, because Mike is more of a lead instead of Reggie, arguably.
Sure, yeah.
The sequel began production when Canadian filmmaker Roger Avery wrote a screenplay titled Phantasm 1999 AD, which was intended as a sequel to Lord of the Dead. It was set in a post-apocalyptic near future and would feature Bruce Campbell as a co-star. As the project ran into financing difficulties, Don Coscarelli wrote and directed this fourth installment as a precursor to the project. So, you know, they were never going to get Bruce Campbell for $650,000.
Yeah, but I guess it could be one of those, vicious circle or Boris things that's like they would have gotten more of a budget if they'd gotten Bruce Campbell signed on, but they wouldn't have gotten Bruce Campbell signed on without that budget.
Do you think Bruce Campbell brings in that much more budget? He always strikes me as like kind of the cream of the B tier crop.
Well, he did Bubba Hotep.
That's true.
Yeah, no, he is very much a B movie actor. But I think there's an understanding of a certain amount of cred that comes with Bruce Campbell, like in nerd spheres. But I think that probably has that currency is a bit more.
Wait, nerd
valid.
What?
Cred.
Nerd and nerd what?
What?
You said spheres. I was making a silver ball joke.
I thought I said nerd cred, and I was like, "What are you doing?" Yeah, he brings in nerd cred, but I think that as a currency, the nerd credibility is it's the inflation. No, like it's a lot more valuable these days. I don't think in 1998 you would have been like, oh well, this niche group of people love Bruce Campbell, so we'll put him in it. Whereas these days, shit like Ash vs. Evil Dead, like putting a Bruce Campbell cameo in your thing is like holds more weight, I think, these days.
Yeah. And another instance of legitimately interesting filmmaking, and maybe why this one edges above the last couple, is this film uses footage of unused endings from the first film, which allows for the narrative to weave in flashbacks featuring the actual younger versions of the actors. Did you notice this? That was super interesting, because I was like,
cool.
How did they do this? because you can,
de-aging was incredible in 1998.
It was probably a reverse engineered, so they probably would have built the script for this one around the available lines.
Yeah, it's like there's the Why Mac Got Fat episode of Always Sunny that Rob McElhenney got fat for a season of Always Sunny, and then they did an episode which was they shot an episode that they never used for the previous season, so they wrote around the existing footage for this episode then made to explain why Mac got fat, so they could do flashbacks without having to wait till he lost the weight to film them.
I thought this was pretty interesting and would have made a pretty seamless and interesting sort of thing in the franchise if they hadn't recast the main guy in the second movie. Returning briefly to Problematic Corner, though, while it's not as creepy in this, Reggie does once again try it on with another woman he meets on the road, a beauty, if you will. And she is pretty uninterested in him as well. He then wakes up next to her in the next morning to discover her boobs have been replaced with the terrifying silver ball. I liked it. That was funny. Like that was like, all right, you got me.
I was trying to look at her boobs.
That's not what I meant. But that's much funnier. Can you tell me what happens at the end of this movie?
No.
Can you make sense of it?
I'm having to remind myself of how it ends. Remind me of how it ends from a objective standpoint.
So one thing we probably should have mentioned in this episode already, is there's this whole thing with like a tuning fork that is like it disarms the tall man if you whack it, but there's also these giant tuning forks which are like portals to another realm, which I never was really too satisfied with what I was explained they were. Like, I didn't really understand what these portals were because they looked very interesting and probably the most interesting part about the franchise, but I never really explained what it was. And it ends with Mike goes through one of these, I think, and meets Jody in a graveyard where he kills Jody because Jody's a bad guy now and he has yellow blood, which is the sign that they're bad now. And then goes back out where he gets attacked by the tall man who comes out of the thing, and then Reggie's like, I'm going back in the thing and I'll save you, and it looks like Mike dies and Reggie just runs back into the portal, the tuning fork portal, and then they didn't make another one for 18 years.
Yeah,
what a cliffhanger.
I don't know that I understood it enough to be that occupied with the mystery. I also had to watch I left these quite late and ended up having to watch them quite quickly. So I didn't have much time to ruminate on what it must have been like to live that 18-year drought of Phantasm films.
We talk about titles a lot on this podcast. What are your thoughts on Phantasm IV Oblivion, and the IV is the IV in the middle of Oblivion?
Do you reckon that they just...
Yes,
I
do
looked for
reckon.
a word. Yeah.
I know exactly what you're going to say. They picked the word Oblivion because it has a Roman numeral 4 in the exact center of it and called it that. Because
which, like, in their defense, that's fucking dope.
It is fucking dope, but the movie, what does the movie have to say on the concept of Oblivion? Nothing.
Well, it's one of the themes, like, bigger is better.
Bigger is better. And the same thing is done with the V in Phantasm Ravager, which we will talk about next. So Phantasm Ravager, a very interesting entry in the series for two reasons. One, it came out in 2016, 18 years after the last one, the longest gap since the gap between 1 and 2. And it's also not directed by Don Coscarelli. It's directed by David Hartman, though Don Coscarelli did stay on as, executive producer, etc., etc. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Okay, so I've been doing my sixes, and my pattern would dictate the next one would be 16. I could see this one having one of those weird spikes where only a few people reviewed it, and a few of them were fans of the series. I'm not going to quite go over fresh, but I kind of want to guess like 56 again.
It's 57, Richard. Very good. You've got this down to a science. 57, so it's the second highest rated since the first film.
Wow.
There you go. And can you, for the final time, read what the Wikipedia page for the Phantasm franchise says that this one is about?
In the series finale, Reggie continues his quest to stop the evil, dimension-hopping schemes of the Tall Man and his armada of killer Sentinel Spheres, which I guess they're called Sentinel Spheres.
They are called Sentinels.
This time, the fight becomes a multi-dimensional battle across an alien planet, multiple timelines and altered realities, where the fate of Earth is on the line.
And audience, guess what's not communicated very clearly?
Any of that.
Any of that. Yeah.
One thing that I think it's in the last one, the introduction of the law that like the spheres contain brains.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
That was kind of cool, but it also feels like the Michael Myers as Laurie's brother of the franchise,
right?
Where it's like, it feels like, oh yeah, of course, like, the Phantasm, the spheres of brains. But I feel like there's probably a subset of people that are like, no, they over-explained it. It's so much better without it. That like, or like if you were to do a true Phantasm sequel, but I mean the fact that Don Coscarelli, like this is his vision through to the end, essentially. I mean, he didn't direct this one, but he stayed on and writing and executive producing. That it is like it feels like the thing you would do, like, yeah, I'm making the true Phantasm sequel, and I'm getting rid of the brain thing. But yeah, the one thing about that is cool about this franchise is that it is someone's singular vision, which we haven't really seen for one of these long-running horror franchises. Other than like the closest one I guess you could say is Scream, but like all of them have. Friday the 13th has Sean S. Cunningham. Nightmare on Elm Street has Wes Craven. Halloween has John Carpenter. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Toby Hooper. That it's like all of these ones, and there's always some story of them trying to get control back, or like, like rejoining the franchise because it went so far off the rails, whereas this one never had that, which is kind of cool.
Interestingly, if Don what's his name? Coscarelli had directed this one, it would have bumped him up into our top 15 directors that we've ever covered, like the most prolific directors for this podcast, just from one franchise alone. Wow. But he didn't, and so he's not.
And this would be close to one of our longest franchises, all directed by the same
guy. Correct. What did you think of Phantasm Ravager? Do you agree with its 57% Rotten Tomatoes score?
No. This like, you messaged me yesterday and said this has big, funded by Kickstarter energy, and aesthetic, but it's like, it's immediately it looks like uncinematic, and that's the thing of what low budget. It like looks like having changed. Because I guess now there's a like, no matter what, there's a charm to film, and something being shot on film and being low budget for the time. It's like, well, it's still shot on film, so it looks cool. This looks like it was shot on an iPhone.
This looks like Reggie Bannister funded it himself because he was bored of not being famous anymore, and called his friend David Hartman to come and film another Phantasm movie.
It does. A lot of it comes down to lighting. That it's very flat lighting. There's scenes shot outdoors where the top of Reggie's bald head is completely overexposed, and as a cameraman who regularly has to light people in the broad daylight, and especially when they're bald, it's a fucking nightmare. But I overcome it. Shooting news, like, you're on a film set. Grow up. So he wasn't a fan of that.
No.
But at the same time, there, like, even that almost has a charm to it, that it does look like this looks like the film your friend made, which looks pretty good for your friend. And you're too embarrassed to give, for their sake, to give proper feedback on.
And you're trying to word your feedback so it doesn't sound like it means what you're saying, and you're like, do you reckon it's wise to, like, cast yourself as the lead character? Like, do you what walk me through that decision? Like, I just really felt connected to the character. It's like, do you want to maybe cast someone who's not bald and has a ponytail? Someone who hasn't looked like that for 30 years? God.
He looks pretty good.
He does look like he hasn't
like,
aged 30 years.
when you look like shit 40 years ago, like, there's not much place to go. Although, like, I just came across, looking at Reggie Bannister, like, I came across a photo of him from, like, the first or second film, and it's like, he looked a lot better. Like, I thought he looked pretty good in this one, but he looked a lot better in the first one.
So I'm a sucker for returning to a franchise after a big hiatus. Even though it's rarely as good, but it always is fun to... This is like old man Reggie, Like, it's all these years later, and that is always interesting to see. And dare I say, there are even shades of Twin Peaks: The Return, the season 3 of Twin Peaks in this. Only in as much as both Twin Peaks and Phantasm 4 promised a sequel, which took decades to arrive. And that's where the similarities stop, to be honest. Because, boy, is this a hard watch. It's confusing. It's cheap in a way that removes all of the charm, as you said, from the original's low budget. And Reggie is back in the saddle as the lone protagonist. He doesn't share the spotlight, really, in this one. And he's up to his old tricks of tracking the tool man, picking up women half his age on the road, and tying his male pattern baldness into a stinky ponytail. You know it stinks. You know it stinks. You know it's a stinky ponytail.
Yeah. It very much. It looks like a fan film, really.
Yes, it so does.
This
or
would
a
be-
web
this is the-
series, like a
this is like-
webisode.
would be the king of fan films. But
yeah.
like every fan film we've looked up a little clip of,
Hmm.
for whatever reason, looks like this.
Yeah. So this movie, after 18 years of development hell, was actually independently funded for allegedly $300,000, which is the same as the first film, but I guess inflation would mean
It's
That's not-
it's less money than
So this is the lowest budget. When have we ever covered a franchise where the last film is a lower budget than the first film?
And what the other thing as well is that this was because this is a weird franchise in that first one was theatrical, second one was theatrical, 3 and 4 was straight to DVD, but this one graduated to theaters again.
Yeah,
which
it came back.
is incredibly rare. Yeah,
Very interesting stats, probably. What the budget for this film does do, though, is it gives the franchise as a whole a pretty mind-blowing stat, Richard, because all 5 movies have a budget of less than $7 million, with a little under half of that being spent on the second film alone.
wow. that is. I don't know. Like I part of me wants to be like, that's so cool, you know.
And it's $7 million across 5 films, and not divided in the way you would do that sensibly if you knew you could spend that much.
Yeah. One thing that is cool about this is that it is a series finale.
Mm-hmm. So 18 years later, God.
Yeah, but then we had Reggie's been the same the whole way through, and the Tall Man has been the same the whole way through, and it's one of those things where like the Tall Man is old in 1979.
Yeah, he's an
still
elderly
there.
man.
37 years later in the sequel.
Well, he actually, do you know this? He passed away at the age of 89 before the movie came out. So
Yeah.
that's how fucking old the Tall Man, like literally like a decrepit skeleton in the 1979 original, is alive 37 years later to be in this one, just before he dies.
Which is insane, because when Phantasm started gaining traction, I had to Google what is Phantasm, and so it's like, okay, the Tall Man's this thing, whatever. Like, he's this old man from the first one. Oh, the Tall Man's a villain in all of them. Oh, okay. I wonder when they recast him, and then found out, oh fuck, it's still him in the and that's like, I mean, you know, full credit to Angus Scrim and Perfect Snogging, that he was able to stay alive to be in all of them.
Yeah, sure, but this just from a frustration perspective, I'm like, how is Phantasm in the end one of the like perfect franchises in terms of its like growth in the story it was given? Like, I'm just so astonished that out of all the projects that have struggled across years and years to get made and to complete their story and to be finished, of all the stories to have been able to provide closure for their fans, Phantasm, a franchise about fucking nothing. It's this auteur's vision, which was allowed to complete its narrative despite all these hardships. Like, give me Pushing Daisies season 3. Give me, like, I don't want. I would trade all of Phantasm for another season of Firefly. You know, like, I don't watch Firefly, but it's just like, of all
You
the
would
things,
want to give maybe Joss Whedon anyway.
of all the projects that have struggled, and like the story of Phantasm, to have been able to, even after 37 years, have completed the story they supposedly wanted to tell. Like, it's not fair. There are so many projects that deserve this treatment that don't get it, and it's this stupid franchise that I hate.
Yeah, it is. I know how somewhat how these things work, and that it's like 300. Okay, fine. Like, what you want, $2 million? Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
That. Yeah, it managed to do this by just completely slipping under the radar of the people whose decision it is to fund these movies and to make them.
And like the sequels came out like all of them came out quite far apart from each other. The closest time is 1998 and 1994 for 3 and 4. And it's just so hard to believe that you've like written one and then they're like, you know what? I need to continue the story. You know, like the way Pixar people talk about sequels, like we're waiting for the right story. It's like, it's just such do you know what it is? It's an uninteresting story. I'm sorry. I'm not interested in the story, and I'm shocked that it has enough mileage to take it across nearly 40 years and 5 films, you know. There is a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene.
Mid-credit's fucking half the movie, it feels like.
It's
like 4 minutes long.
It's 4 minutes long. And it also happens like after maybe 30 seconds of credits. So it's not
even that. It's like directed by, edited by, and then here's fucking the rest of the movie.
Where Rocky shows back up and hangs out with this guy, this little person who's been part of the cast for about 30 minutes before the end of the film, who then like grabs her fucking tit and is like, do I have a chance with you? And it's like, oh my god, free me from this prison. Like, even in its last moments, Phantasm couldn't let me get out of here with my dignity
intact.
With
that one last titty squeeze.
Do you have any favourite moments or anything you want to talk about Phantasm before we move towards the end of the episode?
The score of the first one.
Yeah. Okay.
It's fucking good. like Phantasm 1 as a single movie would be such a great cult classic. And such a good like hidden gem. But unfortunately it's just a fairly unremarkable franchise.
I liked the idea of this one, of Ravager having like all these interdimensional swaps. Like there's like it's very Lost-esque. Like there's Reggie in the retirement home, there's Reggie in the other planet, and it's like not really clear which one's the real one and what's really going on. And I liked that. Kind of reminded me of, it's like a shitty version of The Father, the Anthony Hopkins, where you don't know what time is and what, but it's like, as with everything else in the series, it is very confusing, and worse, it's not only confusing, it's also not very intriguing. It's the rare cocktail of something being enigmatic, but not intriguing at all. All right, well, Richard, that is Phantasm. We're just going to move on now to our final segment of the episode, continue the franchise, where we pitch our own... Segment. Oh, it's one of the final segments. Where we pitch our own franchise continuations, and despite that tantalizing post-credit scene at the end of the last film, I couldn't find any plans for a sixth film.
Everywhere refers to the fifth one as the final one, and with Angus Scrimm being dead as well, I can't imagine they would.
You know, in terms of other Phantasm media, there's books and shit that aren't, again, it's like, you're not going to gain anything from me telling you what the Phantasm comic books are about. So my continue the franchise is called Phantasm Regicide, where everyone kills Reggie and they cut off his ponytail, or just let the man sell ice cream. What is wrong with me? I'm being so evil on this episode. I'm no spring chicken. Who am I to say that Reggie's not fit to be a main character? Anyway, what's your continue the franchise?
My one is called Phantasm, but it's spelled with an F.
Oh god.
And it's in what might be a first, I think, for film franchise Fortnights. This is a documentary in the same kind of vein as Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. And I want to it's a documentary about Phantasm fans finding out, do they actually exist, or was this just a practical joke on us? And
37 years in the making.
What do they like about, like, what's going on? Maybe it follows Reggie Bannister, which would be a great, like, that would probably be a great documentary that this just some guy has, like, presumably is beloved at, like, Comic-Cons and stuff, and, like, horror cons. But yeah, essentially, because legitimately, midway through this franchise, I was like, what was everyone joking? Like, this franchise feels like a practical joke. It feels like this was made up to be like It's like I Am the Walrus, the Beatles song that was made up to be because John Lennon found out that there was a class analyzing Beatles lyrics. So he's like, well, I'm going to do the stupidest one. And like,
I did not know that
feels
about
like that.
I Am the Walrus.
Yeah, it feels like that, where they're like, we're going to make a franchise and then everyone pretend to like it. And it's like, well, maybe we're in that club now. If people ask after this, what do you think of Phantasm? I'm going to say, best franchise ever. And people are going to go, wow, really? And then they'll watch it and they'll be like, this was just kind of like fairly consistent, but pretty boring and didn't really find it remarkable in any way apart from the score for the first film. And I'll be like, good. And then they'll get it.
Similar to like how in The Ring, you have to pass the tape on to not be cursed yourself. You have to tell other people that Phantasm's a really good franchise. And then the tall man stops haunting you. So congratulations.
You get some ice cream from Reggie?
Congratulations, Mike from the Discord. Your curse is broken. You got this one suggested and watched. That's great,
right.
man.
Well, so to continue the trend, I think we have to, for Rank Dat franchise, put Phantasm in the number one spot.
Well, we are on Ranked at Franchise now, which is our Letterboxd list of all the franchises we've ever watched. Phantasm makes our 139th franchise, so the next one will be the 140th. That's kind of a milestone. And what are you thinking? Like, it's probably pretty low. I would put it maybe. Oh, you know where it should go?
Oi, bro.
Maybe that I'd get in trouble for that. What do you think about putting it under the Hammer Mummy movies? Or is it better than the Hammer Mummy movies?
What number are we looking at there?
130.
Yeah.
What
were you gonna say if you'd get in trouble for?
Putting it there, is it better than that?
Let's look at what's above it. Because there's some. I was gonna say there are some above it with no redeeming qualities, but there aren't really. I mean, above it you got things like Bring It On, which I like the first film.
I would probably rather watch George of the Jungle 1 and 2 again than Phantasm as a series again.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that also gets points for being sure. Yeah, let's put it after the Hammer Mummy movies in 130th place. But although this one, is this a Gold Star franchise?
So Gold Star franchise, which indicates franchise with no unanimously agreed upon weak link. I would say it is, but that's not actually up to us. We have to take in critical reception, which I don't think. Like people, that's not what people think of this franchise. They think there's a very clear best one and a very clear worst one, you know?
I think there's a clear best one, but I don't know about how unanimous the weak link is, you know?
Sure, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think as well, Gold Star is supposed to indicate like, hey, the first one's not necessarily the best one, which I think is quite rare for a franchise. Cool. So that's over on our Letterboxd. You can find that in the show notes as well if you like. And Richard, we're now going to do something a little bit different to what we usually do. Usually we do something right now called Franchise Roulette, which is where we take a list of all the franchises we could think of at the time, and we draw a random number, and that number tells us what is the next franchise that we're going to do. But times have been tough, Richard. New Zealand is in the middle of a. How long's the lockdown in Auckland been going now?
It's been going for 9 weeks, and we just got confirmation today that it's going to extend for no shorter than 5 more weeks, likely till the end of the year. And this is the by far the longest lockdown New Zealand's had. And yeah, I've been doing pretty shitty. I'm feeling pretty shitty most of the time. And things like films don't really bring me that much joy at the moment. And especially, and we find this every year, but Spooktober, we're often just bummed out at the end of because you're watching so many films where people just keep fucking dying.
Is that why Halloween Town was such a godsend last Spooktober?
Yeah, and Blade as well. That Blade was like it's not as much a horror, but it kind of is. And so that's where I'm at. And we were talking earlier in the week, and what we're going to do here, it just for my mental health, is we're going to do fun franchise roulette. So we've made a list of franchises that are easy watches, feel good movies. I've added 2 film franchises back into the list.
Oh wow.
Or just generally nicer watches, because after From Dusk Till Dawn and Phantasm, I'm just burnt out. And if you think this is cheating or whatever, the alternative is that we just don't do the podcast for a few weeks, because that was the original idea.
There's also 63 fun franchises we've noted down here. So if you're doubting this, can you name 63 franchises? So you probably will notice a difference. The only reason we're drawing attention to it is because the franchise after this is going to be decided by Patreon, and we also want to encourage fun choices for that one, just for the sake of your mental health. And it's not my mental health. Christchurch isn't in lockdown, but like the world is still a shitty place.
Yeah,
but I am no longer afraid to die.
I keep feeling like I have to like justify, like, I know the whole world has gone through this, and it's like, yep, New Zealand, it's finally your time. It's extra shitty when it's the world is opening up and we finally got, like, we lived without restrictions for a year, and now we have the most restrictions in the world. And I saw someone pointed out, it's like, well, it's it's easier for them now because we've got vaccines, so they're not worried about catching it. And it's like, okay, I still can't leave my house. Like it is funny seeing these things. It's like, yeah, this is actually like we're catching up to be the longest lockdown ever. And if you're sitting in the UK or the US and thinking, but we were locked down longer than that, what you did isn't considered a lockdown by our standards. So anyway, here we are. Fun franchise list, keeping things light and happy. Do you want to do the? I will.
I do also want to say that because of all these reasons as well, the next couple of off weeks we're going to do just some Patreon sample packs to just so you guys can still have content, but it will be content that was released on the Patreon over a year ago, probably maybe even over 2 years ago. So that's going to be what the podcast looks like for the next couple of weeks. Just so that we usually do a Patreon sample pack run each year just as a way to give us a little break. So we're just taking that break a little earlier this year. But Richard, yes, please give me a number from your random number generator.
I'll shut this, the list, so
between
I don't also see
1 and 63.
41.
Did you get that?
Play again.
41.
All right, well, before I tell you what that is, everybody, I do just want to say that if you've enjoyed this episode, and another way you can help our mental health is by supporting Cold Popture at all the different places. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram. You can join our Discord, which there'll be a link to the show in the show notes. Or you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/coldpopture, where for as little as $1 a month, you can tell us what movies to watch, as long as they're fun. And Richard...
yeah, there will be a franchise, if you're listening to this when the podcast is released in the next day or two, there will be the Patreon poll put up to suggest our second franchise for November. But the first franchise for November will be... You were going to say something instead of my segue.
Sorry, your segue was wonderful. I was just going to say you can buy shirts, you can buy merch over in the Cold Popture Teespring as well. There's new merch up there now for Spooktober. There's like our logo, but it's done as Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Hellraiser. Richard, it's a 2-film franchise. We haven't had one of these drawn in a long time, have we?
Yeah, not randomly, yeah.
It is an animated franchise. I think we're probably going to have a lot of fun watching this.
Well, that's good. We like fun here.
I'm trying to think of hints. I feel like any hint I give you, you'll get it immediately. Do you know what I mean?
How old is it?
Last 10 or so years, probably.
Are there any caveats to what we're supposed to do during the episode?
Yes, there is. It says I have to eat an entire thing of meatballs.
Yes. So cloudy on the charts of meatballs.
Yeah, how did you know? pick 41 on purpose?
No, well, you just said it's an animated franchise that any clues would give it away, and it's from the last 10 years. I figured that.
Right, yeah, so we're going to watch Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2. Does it have a subtitle?
I don't think so. If it is, it's something about there being an island.
Yeah, I've seen both of them, I think.
Yes.
And we've also written in here, AJ eats an entire thing of meatballs during the episode, which feels like
Chance of Meatballs too.
A vestige of when we first put the list together and wrote little things like that next to, and have never drawn one in the entire time.
Yeah, because what used to be on there was the Cornetto trilogy was like, we both eat 3 cornettos. The Hangover was said Richard gets drunk.
And both of us getting drunk.
And yeah, like there was a bunch that were taken off at some point, but taken off after we took off 2 film franchises. But when we took off 2 film franchises, I found this. I put them all into another document, and so I could just grab them from that.
Yeah.
So I made like a dump document for them, and so I always just found it, and I think maybe the reason this one was kept was I always just found it so funny that it's the unit of measurement for meatballs is an entire thing.
I got it from Arrested Development, where it's like, and Michael was so upset he ate an entire thing of candy beans. So yeah, tune in 2 weeks' time for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs
There'll be a
2.
lot of those.
Okay, thank you. Where I will be eating allegedly an entire thing of meatballs. And
I'm so excited, like, because this was a joke that has existed since the podcast's inception.
Yeah, right.
And it was like, what 3-4 years ago was locked away to never be seen. And out of 63 franchises, we landed on the one where we're able to revive this joke. That's incredible. This is what fun franchise Fortnights is all about.
This is what Fun Vember is about.
Yeah.
No bad times Vember.
Yeah.
Cool.
Our GMP is bad times at the El Royale because our fans hate us.
So thank you for listening, everybody, and please stay tuned for the post-credit scene, which will play after this music stops. And yeah, thank you so much for a wonderful Spooktober, and we hope you enjoy the Patreon sample packs in the next couple of weeks, and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. What franchise did we just do? I've forgotten. It was Phantasm.
It's gone.
See you later. Bye, everybody. Boy! There you go. There's a Phantasm reference. All right, welcome along, everybody, to the post-credits scene. This is a segment where at the end of each episode, if you donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/cultpopture, you get to give us something to talk about, and this is the post-credits scene. Richard, who's it from? What did they say? What did they ask? What did they want us to talk about in this, the post-credits scene?
This the post-credit scene where for $5, you mean that
Or
post-credit scene. So there's Dylan Hutton. Has asked, and god damn it, I'm just realizing this is the 93rd post-credit scene we've done.
Wow.
Hot damn. That's a lot.
God damn.
God damn. Dylan Hutton writes, if you could create an escape room based around any movie property, what would it be and what are the puzzles? I
should have prepped this one.
I mean, I don't necessarily know about the puzzles because I feel like they're just so elaborate. But in terms of like escape room, I think there's obviously the ones that are gonna draw big crowds are going to be ones based on horror franchises. I'm thinking something like Saw. But I was this even? No, I don't think it was the post-credit scene. But I like The Hangover. The Hangover would be a great one to do. A post-credit scene.
Like you've had a hangover.
Yeah, like you're waking up and Alan has drugged you, and you have to piece together what happened the night before. I mean, essentially, this is just like it doesn't have to be. There's no reason that has to be branded The Hangover, but. Yeah, I feel like that was one of our continue the franchises for, or we did like a point and click game.
Someone's done a. I think The Hangover was a point and click. Game, but one of us has done an escape room as a post credit.
What about you? Have you got any thoughts?
Franchise before? Yep, I'm going to pick Lost in Translation as as my escape room. And the only way you escape is if you figure out what Bill Murray whispered in Scarlett Johansson's ear. That's the password to get out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll forever be lost in translation.
Do you know you whispered in her ear?
What?
McClunky.